Hi, I'm Ashley DeGuzman with Ponton Industries, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to use and configure a HACH AS950 automatic portable sampler. Portable samplers are nice because you can move them from location to location without any big hassles. An automatic sampler is nice because it allows for samples to automatically be taken and distributed into bottles based on the schedule that you set. Now let's start by going into the anatomy of one of these samplers. The first aspect of the sampler is the lid. The lid is what protects the sampler from the environment, and you can easily remove it by unlatching the 3 latches, 1, 2, and 3. Next, you have the controller, which is housed on the midsection. Again, the midsection can be removed from the base by unlatching the latches. In the base section, you have your various bottles. Now, if you're doing discrete sampling, you'll have multiple bottles which will be housed around the rim of the base, with the brace here holding them. If you're doing a composite sampling, you'll have one bottle in the middle. Now, the bottles come in various sizes and materials. In this case, we have 24 plastic polyethylene bottles. Now, if you're doing a sample that requires it being cool, the portable unit does not have refrigeration, so you'll need to use ice. In a configuration like this, the ice would simply go here in the middle. In the case of a composite bottle, you would actually have the ice around the rim. Now, going back to the midsection, on the bottom here, you have what's called the distributor arm. The distributor arm moves around in a circle, filling each bottle on its own turn. In the case where you're doing a composite sample, however, you won't be needing the distributor arm, so you probably wouldn't have ordered it. Or if you did, you can simply remove it and place this tubing directly into your composite bottle. In order to remove it or attach it, you simply use this thumb screw. And just like that, you've removed it. And to put it back, simply snap it into place and use that same thumb screw. Now back on this midsection, again, you have your controller. On this side of your controller houses all of the various ports. The first port here is your USB port. Not only can you use this port to export data from your sampler, but you can also use it to import various configurations from other samplers. Here you have your box import. This port can be used if you have a junction box for flow sampling. And this last port on this unit is the power port. Here is where you can plug in your battery or your other power source. Now, this unit does not have a rain gauge or the other 2 optional sensor ports. If it did, however, those ports would also be located right here on this side. Next, we have the battery side. This is the spot where the battery is housed. In order to put the battery in, you simply place it into this spot, lift these little rubber knobs, and lock it into place. Then you take the power plug and put it right into this port. So this unit can actually be powered by more than just this battery. It can also be powered by an external power source such as AC power, solar, or even a marine battery. Now lastly, we have the intake tubing on this side. Here you'll see the tube port, or the tube bar, which is where your intake tubing actually gets hooked up to the unit. You simply take the end of the tubing and shove it on to that tube bar. Now the other end of the tubing is what goes into your sample source. You'll always want to make sure that you have a strainer attached to the end. In this case, we have a 1-inch Teflon strainer. You just grab your strainer and shove it into the end of that tubing. Now there's a number of different types of strainers that are available. One important thing to keep in mind is that the type and size of your strainer should reflect the type of source that you have. For example, with this particular strainer, you'll need to have at least 1 inch of sample flow in order to be able to read a good sample. Otherwise, you'll be pulling in air just like in a straw and you won't get a good sample. If you don't have 1 inch of flow in your situation, then you'll either need to select a smaller diameter strainer or build a small dam upstream in order to build up and create enough depth for your strainer. Next, we have the desiccant tube. The desiccant is what keeps all of your electronics dry and free of moisture. In normal situations, your desiccant should be orange. However, over time, it'll build up enough moisture to change it from orange to green. In order to check your tube and/or change it out, you simply pull this tubing out to create room and then twist your desiccant tubing out. In this case, the desiccant is green, which means it needs to be replaced. In order to replace it, you simply remove the rubber cap, properly dispose of the desiccant beads, and refill it with fresh orange desiccant beads. Pop that cap back on and screw it back in. Lastly, we have the pump tubing. The pump is located here on this side and openable by a simple thumb screw. The tubing here can easily be installed or replaced by using the movement of the pump to help guide it through. This side connects right here, which is what ultimately connects down to the tubing on the inside, which will go directly into a bottle or be distributed through the distributor arm. Here, the peristaltic pump is actually using its pressure and motion to pull the sample through the intake tubing, through the pump tubing, and down into your sample bottles. And now, let's look at how we configure the sampler.
So here we have the front of the control panel on the sampler controller. We have the main screen, which is a color non-touch screen. So this is not a touch screen. You have the little green light flashing, letting you know that it is running. So the screensaver will blank this out, at which time you can then just see the green light flashing. These two black buttons are called soft keys. So depending on where they are in the menu, it could change function. So this has no function right now, and this black key is select. So this current section of the screen is called programming, and it's highlighted. So if I press select, you can get into that function of the program. To navigate these particular menu choices, it's a function of pressing these up and down arrows and moving left to right, and cycling through them. Once you come up to the parameter that you want to choose, you would then choose select. The status key gives you the current status of what is happening right now, the date, the time, the voltage of the battery coming into it, how many channels are being data logged, and the last time that data log was updated. So right now we're not logging any particular data. If you wanted, you could do pH or ultrasonic level or an area velocity flow probe as well. So those are options on this unit to add that ability, and then this unit will data log and store in its memory the sample times as well as the pH values as well as the area velocity flow probe if that's what you want. All right. So there's, as you can see here, there's nothing detected as far as sensor ports on sensor port 1 or 2. And this unit does have an optional rain gauge, so if you wanted to monitor rain, you could do that too, but you would need an external rain gauge for that. The menu takes you back to this main menu again. Run halt will run the program or stop the program. You can manually operate the pump in forward or reverse. You can calibrate the volume that is taken for each, and in case you need to stop the pump while it's running, there's the stop button. And then there's the power on, power off button. So I'll go ahead and turn it off. It will ask you to confirm, are you sure you want to power it off? And I'll say yes. It will then power it off in 10 seconds. To turn it on, simply press the power button, and it will come back to this screen that you see in the main menu. To set up a sampler, you generally start with hardware setup. So let's go to hardware setup, and again, not a touchscreen. And you select it, You can confirm each of these 5 choices in a row. So we'll say sampler and select that. You can give it a site ID number. So when you're downloading data to a memory stick, you can identify the particular sampler or location. And then this also has to do with how often it can take a rinse. If you want to rinse your intake tubing with your sample matrix first so that you minimize any contamination from a previous sample. And if it fails to take a sample, how often do you want it to take a retry before it gives up and waits for the next time interval? So we'll go back with the back button, scroll down to configure sensors. There are no sensors, so we really can't change port assignments because there are none detected. So we'll back up on this one. The auxiliary and the I/O port. So if you wanted, you can take samples based on flow. If you had an external flow meter, that's where this auxiliary port would come into play, and you can either take a sample from a pulse or what's called a 4 to 20 milliamp signal. So we select the mode. The sample event is what allows you to trigger the sampler based on an external flow pulse or flow reading. You could also tell it to output a signal when the program is complete. So if it was powered up, this sampler will actually tell another device that it's done. Pressurized sampling is an option where if you wanted to take a sample from a pressurized line as opposed to water flowing through a manhole as an example. So we'll back up on that. The flow reading right now is set to pulse. So that means that an external switch just pulsing will cause this to start counting it. And after so many counts, if you say 10, it will tell this to take a sampler. Milliamp is an analog signal from a flow meter, and it will then count how much flow goes by based on the milliamp signal. So we're going to leave it at pulse. And if it times out, or if a pulse happens and doesn't reopen, it will time out after 2 seconds. So the pulses really can't be that long. They need to be 2 seconds or less in this case. Liquid detect is for the actual liquid detector. That's this. This is the liquid detector, and it detects the presence or absence of liquid. So it tells the sampler, I've sampled through the tubing, it's now reached this point, and then it counts the time, or it understands how fast it took to get here and how much longer it should pump for it to go through the pump itself. General settings would be the next one that I would do. And you can then scroll down to date and time, where you can change your date format. Next one goes to where you can change the date, change the time. Once you have everything set properly, select OK. The display choice allows you to change the brightness on this display. Typically, we leave it at 50%. In bright sunlight, you might need to brighten that up a little bit. Security is essentially a password. I don't recommend passwords because they tend to get forgotten. You can always lock this with a padlock as well. Language choices, there's a number of different languages available. Your unit preferences can be in US customary units, or you can change it to metric units. So ounces, milliliters, feet, etc. A tubing life indicator is used when you want to know how many times it's taken a sample, and you can get a preliminary estimate as to how long that tubing will last. This pump is very forgiving on the pump tubing, so it really isn't necessary in an application where you might not be sampling on a daily basis. However, on a daily basis, I always recommend just changing it out of course, preemptive, if you will, every 2 months if it's daily, but even faster if it's pumping a very high distance, such as 20 plus feet of depth on a regular basis. If it's doing that, it will wear the tubing out much faster. Clear the data log that's in the unit itself, and then restore factory default. After hardware setup and general settings, you can then set up the programming. So programming isn't necessarily writing a program, it's really configuring. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. So you can set sample programming, data log programming, and alarm programming. Alarm programming would be sending a signal to the output over here, allowing you to trip a sampler. You can tell a PLC or some other device that an event has occurred. It could be missed a sample, or it could even be I took a sample. And data logging is if you had external sensors, you could record that data. And so we'll actually select that. So you can see that nothing is being data logged right now. Select the AS950, and you can actually data log the power supply. So if you wanted to track the power supply and save that, it's now going to data log what the 12-volt battery is reading over time. Logging intervals, say check that battery every 15 minutes. And in secondary mode, also 15 minutes. If it was, as an example, a pH probe, you could say normally take samples and record it every 15 minutes. But if the pH got above or below a certain threshold, that you can log more often. So that's how that works, primary and secondary interval. Sample programming. So this is the heart of what the purpose of this device is to take samples. So you go into these questions that will flow in sequence. Right now, it's a custom single. You can actually choose a custom dual, 2 programs, stormwater programs, set point sampling, constant time, variable volume. So there's some custom type of programs you can use in the sampler. The descriptions of those are in the manual. Constant time, variable volume is, for example, take a sample every 15 minutes, but change the volumes for each of those samples. So if you wanted to take more samples at the peak flows, you can do that. If you wanted to take fewer samples at 2 in the morning where your flows might be low, you can set that as well. Stormwater essentially are 2 programs. One for when the storm rainfall event could occur, to take a particular sample routine and maybe pour it into 4 bottles. And then the remaining time for the stormwater would be a different routine entirely. So that what's called the first flush, the first hour of a rainfall event is very high in pollution. And then following after that, it just rinses everything off. And set point sampling is if you had an external input, as an example, it would then start the sampler based on a switch. So we'll cancel that. So we're going to go into a single sample routine, not dual, not stormwater. So total number of bottles. So we'll select that and we'll enter 24. Okay. The volume for each of those bottles currently we have in there is not in gallons, but they are 600 milliliters per bottle. The intake tubing link, you need to determine how far from the sampler controller to the bottom of where you're taking your sample. So it could be 20 feet away. In this particular example, it's 24 feet distance, and you need to specify also the size of the tubing. So we have 3/8 inch tubing available. We also have 1/4 inch tubing available in different materials. So we have it in vinyl or in Teflon. So this is where you have your tubing length as well as your materials or diameter. What will pace the sampler? Right now it's based on time. So if you select this, you can say time weighted, flow weighted using an external flow pulse, timetable, so you could do a custom timetable. It does not have to be even, a flow table, and an event such as an external switch. So each of these can be programmed to suit your application requirements. And we'll go back to that as well. So sample volume right now is a fixed value of 200 mils per sample. If you want to change it, scroll down and edit the volume. Right now, its distribution is sample-based as opposed to time-based. So we'll say select that. It's going to be 1 bottle per sample, 1 sample for every bottle. You could have multiple samples in each bottle, but the way it's set right now would be, as soon as it puts a sample in bottle number 1, 200 mils, it's then going to go to bottle number 2. Oops. If it's time-based, you can say a duration of 1 hour. Time-based. Time-based, sample-based. Bottles per sample. 1 bottle per sample. 4 samples per bottle. Pacing is 1 minute. Time weighted. So there you go. 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes it's going to take a sample. It's going to take 200 mils for each sample. It's going to do 4 samples per bottle. In other words, don't take that one sample and distribute it into 4 different locations. Just for 1 bottle, and each bottle is going to take up to 4 samples, then switch on to the next bottle. All right. Start immediately on run or wait until the next interval is your choice. So you can start on run after a particular delay. So you can say start at midnight on an external trigger such as a switch or on a particular schedule. So just say Mondays only as an example. Select immediately on run is nice because then you know you've got it programmed right because it starts working right away. If you did after a delay, you then choose a particular date and time, or about a flow, or wait for another sampler to trigger this one. So you have a lot of options on here. Typically, people will not delay, or if you do a delay, it's just going to be a particular date and time. So you might want to sample only from midnight to midnight, as opposed to if you were to put this out in the field at 2 in the afternoon, you may not want to start at 2 and end at 2. You might want to choose how you do that. And then the program end, you can say end it after the samples are all done at a particular date and time, or after a certain amount of time. After 4 hours, you might only want to take 4 hours of a sample. You just say after 4 hours. And that's it. We're back to the beginning. Once you have your program done, you can hit the main menu, and you can hit Run Halt, and you can choose Start Program. It's going to clear out the memory that's in here, load the new program. I can feel the distributor arm spinning around to a particular one. After it goes to bottle number 1, it will start the pump. Okay, so for using the USB stick, you do export, import. You need to make sure that you have a USB stick that's USB 2. So export, import, connect flash drive to USB port and press next to continue. You can export the data that you have in here. We haven't logged any data, but things such as power supply, sampling routine, all that information can be exported. So we'll select that, export it, and there's your summary. Okay. Export, import, next. I want to export the settings, and these are the program settings that we just put in. We can export that to the USB stick. We'll say settings 1. And if you wanted to import, in other words, if you had a blank or an unknown sampler program, you could take your USB stick, put it in, and choose select for importing. You would then look at the stick and say settings 1. All data will be erased. You sure? Yes. It's going to take it and you're okay. So the settings that were on the USB stick are now in this unit here. That's pretty simple.
And with that, now you know how to use and configure a HACH AS950 automatic portable sampler. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Ponton by email at info@pontonind.com. Thank you for watching this video.